So I had thousands of login attempts on my VPS and had no idea it was happening until I checked the logs. My server was almost compromised, and if they had broken through, I would be the one held responsible because it's my VPS, my account, my IP, and also my name on the bill. Now, if you think you are safe, just run this command on your VPS. It shows every failed login attempt on your VPS, and if you never checked it, you might be in for a shock. Please do not ignore this video if you own a VPS and haven't done any real security setup yet. I was lucky, but I acted fast. I disabled root login, I turned off password authentication, I changed my SSH ports, and I installed a tool that auto blocks hackers after a number of failed attempts. Now my VPS is more secure, stable, and running very smoothly. Now these 4 key steps I took, that's exactly what I'm going to teach you in this video. And as most of my tutorials, this is going to be beginner friendly with no Linux wizardry required. So I'll be walking you through all the steps from the basic tweaks to the most essential protections, and the last 2 non-negotiable. If you skip them, you are leaving your server wide open. So stick around because combining all these options gives you the maximum protection. So the first thing that we're going to do is to change the default SSH port. So typically whenever you purchase a VPS, unless you specify a specific port, the port by default is port 22, and any hacker knows that the default port is 22, and that is why the first thing that we're going to do is to change the SSH ports. So typically when you want to connect to your VPS server, you type the command SSH space root @ you put in the IP address of your VPS server and you press enter. You put in your password and then connect it to your VPS server. Now what we just did, we connected to the VPS using the default port 22, but this is what we want to change. Now to change this is very simple. What I'm going to do is I'm going to clear the screen by just typing clear, just to get the screen a bit cleaner. Now decide on any port you want to use, typically between 1024 to 65535. Now in my example, I'm going to be using the port 4422. But very important, before you change or decide on any ports, you need to make sure that this port is not being used by any application on your VPS. Now in order to do so, we need to check which ports are being used by which applications. Now to do so, you can just use a simple command sudo ss-tuln, and do not worry, all the commands that we're going to be using here I'm also going to provide in the description section. So just press enter and this shows you the current ports that are being used. So you can see here I'm using port 53, port 53, port 22, and port 22. So I do not use any other port because this is just a testing VPS server that I use for my tutorials. So I do not see any application using the port 4422 that I want to use. So what we're going to do is we're going to go into the SSH configuration and change our default SSH port from 22 to, in my case, 4422. Make sure you do not use 4422, just use any number within the range that I provide. So I'm going to clear the screen again and I'm going to put in this command. So what this command is going to do is it's going to use the nano text editor to allow us to make some changes in the SSH configuration. Now when you put in this command, just press enter. Now this brings a lot of text. We do not need to change a lot at this stage. To change the SSH, it's only one section that we're going to make a change to. Now just press down on the arrow key. You see that I have this cursor here. When I press down, it just goes to the next line in this configuration text file. Now what we are looking for is this option here, port 22. You see that currently we have a pound by the port 22, which means that this is not active. So what we're going to do is you're just going to press the right key and then you're going to clean the pound symbol, and immediately you take it off. You see that the color changes, in my case from blue to green, which means that this line is now activated. Now what we're going to do is we're going to change this port. In my case, like I said, I want to use port 4422, and when you are done, basically that's it. In most cases you can press Ctrl S and the nano configuration would be saved, but for my tutorial I realized that for some people Ctrl S does not work. So what you can do is you can press Ctrl X, X for xylophone, and then here you see that it asks you if you are sure you want to save this. I'm going to press Y for yes, and I'm going to press enter again to confirm that I want to write to this SSH config, and now the SSH configuration has been saved. But before you do anything, you need to make sure that if you have any firewall on your VPS, you update the rules to add this new port that we have. In my case, I do not have any firewall activated, so I do not need to change anything with respect to my firewall. But in case you have a firewall activated, just put in this command here, sudo ufw allow, and then here you're going to replace this 4422 with a new port that you set for your SSH, then slash, then TCP, and after that just press enter, and then it will tell you that your rules, your firewall rules, have been updated. By the way, just activating firewall is one of also the best security you can have. In my case, because I use this VPS exclusively for testing, that's why I do not include all these firewall rules. Now, after we have updated the firewall, the next thing that we're going to have to do is to restart the SSH service. Remember that we made some changes to this configuration file, but this is not going to be activated unless we restart the SSH service. Now, to do so, you're just going to use this command here, system control restart SSH, and then press enter. And then now the changes that we made are technically ready. Very, very important. I repeat, very, very important. Do not close the current terminal that you are logged into until you test your new SSH port and see that this is working. If you made any mistake in the configuration file and you close this terminal, you wouldn't be able to access your VPS, and that is why please do not close this terminal yet. Let's test the new port that we configured before we close this terminal. Now, to test the new port, I'm just going to open a new window in my PowerShell, and I'm going to try to connect to the same VPS using the same initial command that we used. Now I'm going to press SSH just like I have it here, and I'm going to press enter, and then you see it tells me immediately SSH connect to 20, whatever my IP address is, port 22, connection refused. And this is what we want. We don't want anyone to try to even connect to our VPS using the port 22, because we have now changed this port and the hacker would not know what this port is. And if you now want to connect to the VPS using this port, we're just going to use the same command that we had, but instead of this, you're going to press space, you're going to type -p, you're going to press space, and then you're going to put in the new port that we set, which in our case is 4422, and then press enter. And then now when I put in the password and I press enter, hola, you see that I'm connected to the VPS server. So no hacker would be able to access the VPS server using the default port 22. They need to find which port I'm using now for my SSH. And it's very important. One thing you have to realize is that immediately you forget the port that you used, you can't connect to your VPS server. And that is why it's extremely important to make sure that this number is saved somewhere or is something that you can remember. Nevertheless, whilst this is one of the good things you can do to secure your VPS server, from what I read most of the time, a hacker would be able to basically scan your IP address or your VPS server and identify which ports you are using to connect to your VPS and start banging you with some attacks. And that is why there is another security tip that I would give you systematically to tighten the VPS server even furthermore. So I'm going to clear the screen now, and we're going to go to the next step. Now, what you realize is that when I wanted to connect to the VPS server, I used the command ssh root at my IP address. Now, and this is the issue. By default, all VPSs give you the default username root, and using root to log into your VPS server could be one of the dangerous ways, because this could be a huge security risk. Why? Because every hacker would try to be banging your VPS with attacks using the root username. Even if I'm not a hacker and identify what the IP address of your VPS is, I can basically just use this command to be slamming your VPS with login attacks. And that is why the next thing that we're going to do is to completely disable logging into the VPS server using the root account. Now, to do so, we need to create a new user account, give this user root privileges, and then we would disable completely logging in to the VPS using your root username. Now, to do so, I'm just going to connect to my VPS now, still using the root account. I'm going to put in my password and I'm going to press enter. I'm going to clear the screen now just to make it a bit easier to see and follow what I'm doing. Now, to add a new user, you can just use the command add user space, and then you put in the username that you want to use. In my tutorial, I'm going to use the username Depend Inspiration Hub. Now, you can use any username that you want. Just make sure that this is a username that you're going to remember, because we're going to disable login with root, and then if you forget this username, I'm sorry, but you can't connect to your VPS server. And this is why this is quite a huge security tip. Now, when you are done, just press enter, and then you see that the user has been added. What I would have to do now is to type the password that I want to give to this user. I'm going to put in the password, and as you guys know, when you right click, it pastes whatever you have in the clipboard. I'm going to press enter, I'm going to retype the password, and I'm going to press enter. And then here you can basically fill in these credentials, but I'm going to skip it because it's not needed. It's going to confirm, and I'm going to confirm that all this information is correct by pressing Y, and I'm going to press enter. And then now we have a new user added. Now the next thing that we're going to do is to give this user account sudo privileges. Now to do so, you're just going to use this command here, user mod -ag sudo, and then space, and then you're going to type in the username or the new user account that we created. So in my case, this is Deepen Inspiration Hub. I'm going to paste this in here, and that means that I want to give Deepen Inspiration Hub, which is me, the sudo privileges. And when you're done, just press enter. Now this is very, very important, because if you do not do this, your new user account that you created will not be able to do any administrative tasks, and that is why it's very important that you do this step to ensure so that you can still do the administrative tasks using the new user account that you created. So now that we have created a new user, we're going to have to test to see if we can log in into this VPS using the new user account that we create. So I'm going to open a new terminal on my PowerShell. I'm going to recall the command that we used to connect to the VPS server. I'm going to go to the step here, and instead of root, I'm going to type in Deepen Inspiration Hub, and I'm going to press, and you can see that it seems to be working. So I'm going to put in my password, and I'm going to press enter, and then bam, you see that I'm connected to the VPS. So here I'm connected as Deepen Inspiration Hub, and in the root account we are connected as root. But it doesn't end there. The main reason why we want to create this user account is that we want to disable logging in with the root user account. Now to do so, we're going to have to go into the same SSH configuration file that we used to change the default SSH ports, but here we're going to disable a different permission. Now to disable this, I'm going to clear the screen again just so that it's cleaner for you guys to follow the new commands that I'm using, and I'm going to paste in this command sudo. Using nano editor, we want to edit the SSH configuration file, and just press enter. I'm going to put in my password, and I'm going to press. Now we are in the SSH configuration file. If you watch the first section where we change the default SSH port, this is technically the same place that we are. Now what we're going to be looking for is a line with the text permit root login. So I'm just going to scroll down and look for where this is. And in my case, this is the second to last command in this SSH configuration file. So currently you see that it says permit root login, it says yes. So that means that anyone can try to connect to the VPS using the default root account. And this is what we don't want, because we have created a special account that we want to be using to log into the VPS server without the root credential. So I'm going to come here, and then instead of yes, I'm going to change this to no, meaning I do not want anyone to try to connect to the VPS server using the default root account. So I'm going to save this in my case using Ctrl S, and I'm going to exit using Ctrl X. So S for save, X for xylophone. So now we have changed the configuration. If you want to double check if the configuration was correctly saved, you can also use this command here, and it would basically tell you which status your permit root login is. In my case, you see that now it's no, because we have changed this to no. Now the next thing that we're going to have to do is to restart the SSH service so that this new configuration that we did will take effect. So I'm going to press restart. I'm going to put in this command to restart the service, and I'm going to press enter. So now our SSH service has been restarted. Remember, I do have root login here, so I'm going to close this. But very, very important, please do not close this current terminal that we created until you are sure that the things that we did are correct. Now, so I'm going to open the new console, and I'm going to try to connect to the VPS server now using the root account. So SSH root at my IP address, and I'm going to press enter. Let's see what's going to happen. So I'm going to put in my password, and I'm going to press enter, and then bam, you see it tells me permission denied, because I have completely disabled logging in with my VPS. Even if I try again, it's still not going to work, because I have completely disabled anyone to connect to the VPS using the root account. So that means that if I want to connect to the VPS, I won't use root SSH root at my IP address. Instead, I will use the new Deepen username that we created, which is Deepen Inspiration hub. And then when I connect with this and I put in my password, we are now connected to the VPS server. And this is a very good tip, guys, because by default, every VPS logs in with a root account, and this is not what you want to do. So just create a new user account, give it the sudo privileges, and disable root user login. And this would also be a very good security tip that you can get. But remember, make sure you do not forget the username, because if you forget the username, you wouldn't be able to log in to your VPS server. Quick pause. If you're finding this video helpful, please hit like and subscribe. It takes just 2 seconds, but helps me keep dropping quality content like this to you. If you already subscribed, thank you. If you're new here, welcome on board as well. If you also want to get early access to videos, new project launches within the Depend space, make sure you head to dependinspirationhub.io, hit subscribe, and drop your email. Trust me, it's going to be no spam, just good stuffs straight to your inbox. And now, back to the video. So to recap, what have we done so far? We learned how to change the default SSH port from 22 to our customized port number. We have also disabled logging in into the SSH server using the root account. Now the next step is one of the superpowers that you can install. There would be users who would consistently be trying to log in into your VPS server, or these could be bots. What we want to do is we want to install an application that automatically detects that users are consistently trying to log in into your VPS and then basically bans them. And this is one of the best tools you can have to secure your VPS server. And this application is called Fail to Ban. So Fail to Ban will take care of all the failed login attempts and block all these guys from trying to come in into your VPS server. Now to install Fail to Ban, you're going to use the command sudo apt install fail to ban and then -y for yes. Now fail to ban is a free application that you can use, so you do not have to pay if you want to use this. Now when you press this, I'm going to put in my password now, and I'm going to press enter, and then fail to ban is installed. And what we're going to do now is to enable the fail to ban application using the command sudo system control enable fail to ban and press enter. Now this is now enabled. What we want to do now is to start the fail to ban service. Now immediately you start the fail to ban service, your protection has already begun. Fail to ban will start monitoring those that are trying to connect to your VPS and start to bind them within a set of rules that we're going to give to fail to ban. So by default, immediately you install fail to ban, it starts working with a defined set of default configuration. But if you want to go even to the next level, you can even get things even stronger. To change the default configuration to what we would want to set, we're going to have to make some changes to the configuration file. So the files of fail to ban are typically stored within this folder etc fail to ban. So when I change into this directory and I type ls, you're going to see all the files that fail to ban is using. So there is one file called fail to ban.config and there is another file called jail.config. Now what we want to edit is the jail.config file. But the tip is that we do not want to edit this file directly. From what I learned, if you edit this jail to config and probably the jail to ban application updates, it is possible that it would reset to the default configuration. And that is why we're going to make a copy of this file and then we're going to edit this copy. Immediately we make a copy of this jail.config file to another file called jail.local. Fail to ban would always pick the configuration from this jail to local file, not from the original default jail to config. And we're going to make this copy using this command here, sudo cp make a copy of this file here in this location and call this file jail.local. So I'm going to put in this command here, and then now when I type ls, you see that we have a new file that is called jail.local, and this is the file that we're going to edit to change the default configuration. Now to edit this file, we're going to use this command here, sudo nano, which is just a text editor, to say that we want to edit this file in this folder. And we're talking about this file that we created here. Now when you put in this command, just press enter and then you see a whole lot of configurations. So when you scroll down, we're going to go to one section that will allow us to customize the things that we want to do. So this is where we get to. Now there are several things that you can configure at this stage. To explain what these mean, I'm going to start from the bottom to the top. If someone tries to log in into your VPS and it's not successful 5 times, fail to ban is going to ban them. The duration here is the number of failed in attempts without a defined time range. So that means that if the user or if the hacker enters a wrong password 5 times within 10 minutes, ban the person. Now, when the person is banned, how long do you want to keep them banned? And then here it says that when you ban a user, just ban them for 10 minutes. Now, I'm going to even go harsher just for an example. What I'm going to say is that I want to keep the ban time for 1 hour, meaning if someone tries to log in into my VPS server after set duration of time, ban them for 1 hour. Now, the time here, I can leave the time to 10 minutes, but I would like to reduce the maximum failed attempts to 3. Now, what this means is that if an attacker or a hacker tries to log in into our VPS and they enter a wrong password 3 times within 10 minutes, I want to ban them for 1 hour. Now, this is very, very important. You can go very harsh, but it could also affect you yourself if you forget your password. But I trust that if you are connecting to your VPS several times, you know what your default password is. Hence, the probability that you would be affected is very low. Now, what you can also do as an added configuration is to whitelist your home IP. So probably you always connect to your VPS server using your PC at home. You can whitelist your home IP address so that failban never bans your IP. Now, I personally do not do this because I'm typically using a VPN on my PC, so my IP address never stays the same. And that is why I personally do not do this ignore IP. But if you want to do this, it's very easy. What you can see here is that this line is commented. You can simply activate this line by removing the pound key at this stage and then come to the end of this line and then type in your home IP address. For instance, 132.45.67.89. Now, just put in your IP address or your home IP address and then you would be good to go. Now, what we want to do now is after you have enabled all these configurations, it wouldn't work until we save and we reload the fail to ban service. Now, to save, you can just press Ctrl S, just like S for save, but sometimes it doesn't work for some people. So I'm also going to show you another way that you can save. You can press Ctrl X, X for xylophone, and then it's going to ask you if you want to save this. We're going to press Y for save, and then it's going to ask you if we are sure we want to write this. I'm going to say yes by pressing enter. And then now our new fail to ban configuration is saved. But remember, these configurations are not going to work until we restart the fail to ban service. Now, to restart the service, just use the command sudo system control restart fail to ban, and then bam, our fail to ban is activated. And remember what we said: if any user has 3 failed login attempts within 10 minutes, that user is going to be banned for 1 hour. And then we added a whitelist that our home IP would never get banned. This is one of the best ways that you can secure your VPS server, because there are going to be constantly bots or people trying to log in into your VPS server, and you want to get these guys banned by using this easy free application called fail to ban. Now, if you want to check to see if probably you are curious if fail to ban is really banning people or banning users, you can also use this command sudo fail ban to client status SSH and press enter. Sorry, I made a mistake. There is a SSHD here, and press enter. And interestingly, just within the time that I installed it, there has been already 1 failed login attempt on my VPS. So fail to ban is constantly monitoring who this guy is, and if they have a number of failed in attempts within 10 minutes, they will just get banned. Let me see if this has been updated. Okay, so the person has still not logged in again, but now I know that whenever there is someone trying to hack my VPS server within a particular duration of time, 3 attempts within 10 minutes, they're going to be banned for 1 hour. And this, guys, is non-negotiable. Please make sure that you install fail to ban on your VPS to harden your VPS server. Now, let's take a step back and look at what we've done so far. We changed our SSH port from port 22 to, in my case, port 4422. Additionally, we disabled logging into the VPS server with the root account by creating a new user account, sudo privileges. On top of this, we also installed an application that is called fail to ban that automatically detects hackers and bots trying to log in into our VPS server and blocks them after a number of failed attempts. Now, the icing on the cake, which is the most important thing I would also recommend that you do additionally to the fail to ban and the other things that we mentioned, is by disabling password authentication. So typically when you want to log in into your VPS server, you use SSH space roots or whatever that you change this to at, and then you put in your IP address. For instance, in my case, as an example, Now, the issue with this is that people would constantly trying to log in into your VPS server by trying all sort of random words. In our case, luckily we have failed to ban that is going to take care of this, but there is even a better way to do this by completely disabling password authentication. So that means that you do not need a password to log into your VPS server, rather you need a secret key. And this is, guys, one of the best ways you can secure your VPS server, and I'm going to teach you exactly how we're going to do this. Now, to do so, we're going to need two applications. Now, the first application that we're going to need is called PuTTY, and this is technically the application that we're going to need to connect to the VPS server using this SSH key authentication. The second application that we're going to need is called PuTTYgen, and this application is going to generate this SSH key, private key and public key for us so that we would be able to connect to the VPS server. Don't worry, I'm going to explain every step as we go through. What you need to do is to download these two applications. So for PuTTY, please download, depending on your processor type, what the right application is in your case. Unfortunately, it appears PuTTY is not available for Mac OS. Sorry guys, but this is currently only available for Windows. The second application that we're going to need is also the PuTTYgen, and then here as well, download the right one that fits to your processor. So what we're going to do now is to open the PuTTY application, and this is how it looks like. What we're going to try to do is to log in into our VPS server using the standard way that we log in into the VPS server if we were to do this using, for instance, Windows PowerShell. Now, to log in into the VPS server, it's technically just your username at your IP address of your VPS server and then the port all you need. In my case, I'm using the username Depend Inspiration Hub at, I'm going to put in the IP address of my VPS server, and then my port hasn't been changed. I'm still using port 22 just for the sake of this tutorial. What I'm also going to do is I'm going to save the credentials or this session here by just calling this YouTube tutorial, and I'm going to click on save, and I'm going to connect to the VPS server by just double clicking on YouTube tutorial. Now, PuTTY is going to ask me if I'm sure I want to connect to the server. Because I'm pretty sure all the credentials are correct, I'm going to click on accept. And now I'm going to put in the password to my VPS server by just typing this in, and I'm going to press enter. And then now you see that I'm connected to the VPS server using password authentication. But we want to change this. We don't want to connect to the VPS server using password authentication. And to generate these keys, we're going to need this application that is called KeyGen. And this is how the KeyGen application looks like. Now, what we're going to do here is we're going to generate two things. We're going to generate a public key and we're going to generate a private key. Now, to explain these two things, I'm going to make this a bit simpler. What a private key is can be sort of a key that you use to open a door. So the private key that you generate is your key, your physical key that you use to open your door, and the public key, you can think of it like the lock in which you insert the key. So to connect to the VPS server, the key and the lock has to be compatible. If you have an incompatible pair, just like any door that you open, you wouldn't be able to open the door. And that is why we need a specific combination of public key and private key for the door to be able to open, or in our case, for us to be able to connect to the VPS server. Now, to generate these pairs, you just click on generate and then just move your mouse here. Like it says here, please generate some randomness by moving the mouse over the blank area, just to give you something to play with whilst the keys are being generated. So now the keys have been generated. The one that you see up here is our public key, which we're going to add to the VPS server to be able to connect to it. Now, what you can also do is you can put a password on this private key. Now, the idea is that we're going to save these keys as a file somewhere on your PC. So if anyone gets access to this file, they technically would be able to connect to your VPS server if they know the public key. Now, what I highly recommend is that you put a password on this key. You can just do so by typing in the password here and confirming the password in this section. In my tutorial, I'm not going to put in the password because I just want to get a tutorial to be a bit fast. Now, what we're going to do is we're going to save these two combinations, the public key and the private key. Technically, we only need to save the private key, but I'm just going to save this too, just for the sake of demonstration. So I'm going to click on save public key. I'm going to save this here as public key, and I'm going to click on save. Now I'm going to do the same thing for the private key. I'm going to click on save private key, and it's warning me that I'm not putting in a password. Like I said, just for this tutorial, I'm not going to do so, but I highly recommend that you put in a password. I'm going to click on yes, that I'm sure I want to save this without a password, and I'm going to save this as private underscore, and I'm going to click on save. Now we have these two things that we need to connect to the VPS server. The next thing that we're going to do is we're going to copy this public key and save it in our VPS server, and we're going to load our PuTTY application now with the private key that we created. Now to do so, I'm just going to clear the space on the VPS server so that it becomes a bit cleaner for you to see what I'm doing. So what I'm going to do now is we're going to go into the VPS server and we're going to add this public key to the VPS server. I'm going to make this console a bit bigger so that you can follow what I'm doing. I'm going to clear the screen by just typing clear, and then we can have a clean space to work with. Now please pay attention here. What we're going to do is we're going to create a new folder that is called .ssh, and in this folder we're going to save our authorized keys. It happens sometimes that for some VPS providers, they already create these folders for you. For other VPS providers, these folders are not created. So before you do anything, just put in this command here to check to see a folder already exists with authorized keys. So in my case, I'm going to press enter and I know that it doesn't exist. And that's why I get this information, cannot access this because there is no file or directory. So what we're going to do is we're going to create, in my case, this folder, and then we're going to put in the authentication keys. Now as always, I'm going to clear the screen to make it a bit cleaner, and then now we're going to make this folder. Now to create this directory, we're going to type in mkdir space and then .ssh and then put in enter. After we have created this folder, we're going to change into this directory that we created by typing cd space ssh and then pressing enter. So now you see that we have entered this folder that we just created. Now in this folder, we're going to create an SSH configuration, and we're going to create this using the nano text editor. So just put in this command here, nano space authorized keys, and then press enter. And like I said, I'm going to provide all these commands to you so that you do not need to type them one after the other. So now you see that we have a clean space where we are going to paste in the SSH keys. So now I'm going to open my keygen, and then very important, make sure that you select everything here. It's very important that you select everything here. Right click and choose copy. Come into the console, right click to paste in everything that you copied. So in PuTTY sometimes it looks a bit weird. You see that I just see 5 characters, but technically everything has been copied. If I press the left key, you see that I have everything that I copied pasted in here. Now to save this, in some instances you can use just Ctrl S and this would save it. On other PCs this does not work, so sometimes you have to press Ctrl X for xylophone, and then confirm that you want to save this by pressing Y and enter. In my case, Ctrl S works, so I can just leave the nano editor by pressing Ctrl X for xylophone. So now you see that when I go into the same file again with the nano with the authorized keys, you see that now it's not empty. I have something in there. So technically we have now saved the authorized keys, and the next thing that we're going to do is we're going to try to connect to our VPS using these authorized keys. Now to do so, I'm going to close the terminal here because currently we are connected with a password and we want to connect with a private key. So I'm going to close this console here. I'm going to confirm I want to close the session. I'm going to open PuTTY again, and then when the PuTTY application is opened, very important, make sure that you come here, you select the YouTube tutorial, which is in my case my saved session. Yours might be something different, and then click on load. Now when you click on load, you see that it shows the username and the IP address and the port that we used to connect to the VPS the first time. Now in the left section here, come to connection, and under connection, if this is closed, click on the plus icon to open this section. Come to SSH and then click on the plus icon. Come to auth for authentication, and again click on the plus icon, and in this section here, come to credentials. Now under the credentials, we would be uploading our private key. So just click on browse and then select wherever that you saved this private key. So I have selected mine, and you can see that the path is loaded in this location. Very important, don't do anything, come up, click on session again, click on the saved session, and then click on save. Now if you do not do this just like I did, the parameters and the private keys would not be saved for that particular session. Now what I'm going to do now is I'm going to connect to the VPS server. If you remember the first time that we connected to the VPS server, we needed to put in a password, but now with the private authentication, PuTTY is not going to ask us for a password. I'm just going to double click to try to connect to the VPS server, and then bam, you see that it works. We logged in without having to put in our password, and you can see at the top here it says authenticating with public key. So that means that we logged in into the VPS server using our public key. But it doesn't stop there, guys. The main reason why we are doing this is we want to disable password authentication. But very important, before you do that, make sure that your SSH keys that you created are working. And in my case, I tested this and I know it's working. I can close this. When I open PuTTY again and I double click on YouTube tutorial, this is already saved. So each time I want to connect to my VPS, I do not need to connect with a password, which is cool, right? So that is the first step. We have enabled SSH key authentication. The next step, we're going to disable logging into the VPS using a password. Now to do so, I'm going to clear the screen here and we're going to edit our SSH configuration. Now if you've been following the tutorial from the beginning, this is the same configuration that we use to change the SSH ports and disable the root login. Now to change the SSH configuration, just use this command here. Like I said, I'm going to provide this to you so you do not need to worry. Nano etc SSH SSD configuration and just press enter. And the reason why in my case I'm getting this file not unwritable is that I created a new user account. I'm not logging in with the roots. So in order to be able to edit the SSH configuration, I'm just going to leave this. I'm going to press Ctrl X, and then for the same command that I entered, I'm going to prefix this command with sudo. If you are logging in with a root account, you wouldn't need to prefix the command with sudo, but because I created a new user account called Dependent Inspiration Hub, that is why I need to prefix the command here with sudo. I'm going to now press enter. I'm going to put in my password and I'm going to press enter. And then now we are in our SSH configuration. And then here we're going to change 5 things, and I'll walk you through all of them one after the other. The first thing that we're going to change is we're going to change password authentication, and we're going to set this to no. So you can just press down to search where password authentication is, or you can also just press Ctrl W on your keyboard, which would bring a search field, and then here just type in password authentication. Maybe I can just type password and it comes. So you see that it brings me directly to where I have password authentication. So this is one of the fields that we're going to change, and we're going to comment out this one as well. Now to change this, just use your keys on your keyboard. You can see where I have the bright green cursor. That is where I am. Now to comment this out, just press the backspace to remove the pound. So wherever you have pound, it means that that comment, that section is not enabled. Now I have commented this out, and immediately it's commented out, you see that it turns to white. The ones that are still commented out or that are not active are basically the ones that I have, in my case, in teal blue. I don't know whatever the color is here. Now I have commented this out, and very important, what we're going to change here is we're going to change password authentication to no. Now down here, I'm also going to comment this out, and I'm also going to restrict permitting empty password. What this basically does is that it tells the VPS that when someone is trying to connect to the VPS and the person doesn't have a password, just block them. In our case, passwords are going to be disabled anyway because we have set password authentication to no. Another thing that if you have yes, I would recommend to change is this section here, challenge response authentication. This should be set to no, but in my case and in most cases, this is already set to no. So we have 3 things: password authentication, permit empty password, challenge response authentication. All of these are set to no. The other thing that I would also recommend you set are the following. Use a search again for Ctrl W, and then here I'm going to search for use PAM, and then here as well I would recommend you set the use PAM also to no. The last thing that we're going to check is that we have public key authentication enabled. Now to do so, just press Ctrl W and then search pub key and press enter. And you can see that currently it's not active, so very important, I'm going to remove the pound key here and I'm going to set this to yes because I want to enable public key authentication because I have disabled public key authentication. Now when everything is done here, remember we changed public key authentication to yes. We also changed password authentication to no, permit empty password to no, challenge response to no, and the last thing that we also changed is the UP use PAM, which in my case was already no. And when we have done all these, we can now save these configurations by pressing Ctrl S. And when this is saved, in my case, you get a confirmation that root 123 lines. That means that a new configuration has been saved. And to exit the screen, I'm just going to press Ctrl X, X for xylophone. And then it brings us back to the console. So now that we have updated our VPS configuration, we need to restart the SSH service so that the changes that we made in the config file will take effect. Now to do so, just use the command sudo system control restart SSH and press enter. And now my SSH has been restarted. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go into a new console and I'm going to try to connect to this VPS server using a password and see if this is going to work. So here I have Windows PowerShell opened. I'm going to try to connect to the same VPS using SSH, my username, and the IP address of my VPS server, and I'm going to press enter. And then now you see that it tells me immediately permission denied. So when anyone tries to connect to the VPS server, they wouldn't even get a chance to get into the VPS server because we have completely disabled password authentication. Now, what is very, very important that you have to take note is that because you are logging in with a private key, whenever you are connecting to the VPS server, you need to have this private key with you. That is sometimes the downside, but hey, it comes with security. So because I work with a lot of VPSs, sometimes it becomes really cumbersome working with all these private keys, saving them here and there. So I use an application that is called Temios, and Temios is basically an application that you use to also connect to a VPS server. And the advantage with Temios is that it saves all the credentials of your VPS server. You can even generate an SSH right within Temios and push it to the VPS server without having to go through all the long process that we did. If you have your private key also saved somewhere like we did, you can also do this with Temios. So for instance, I'm going to do this with this VPS that we just connected to, the same that I connected to using PuTTY. And then when you come here, you see that I have my IP address. This is how I named the VPS server. I have my port, I have my username, and I have the password that I used to connect to the VPS server. Now, if I try to connect to the VPS server, it wouldn't work because we have disabled password authentication. So if I still want to connect to the VPS server using Temios, I'm going to have to load the private key that we generated, and it's very easy to do so. I'm going to click on close. I'm going to come to the left section here and I'm going to click on keychain, and then I'm going to create a new key, right? I'm going to call this key, for instance, in my case, YouTube tutorial, and you can either paste in the private key, but remember we saved our private key. So I'm just going to click on plus here and I'm going to load the private key that we created, and this has already been saved automatically. So if I want to now connect to the VPS server using this private key, I just have to come back to my host, select that VPS server, and in this case I'm going to remove password because I'm not going to be entering the VPS server using a password authentication, but rather with my private key. I'm just going to click on key here and I'm going to select key, and then here you remember the key that we created, we call this YouTube tutorial. So I'm just going to select YouTube tutorial, which means that now I'm going to connect to the VPS server, not using a password, but with using the private key. And then now when I click on connect, hooray, you see that we are connected to the VPS server. So like I said, if you have very little number of VPSs that you work with, it's very easy to just save it somewhere and use PuTTY. But because I work with a lot of VPS servers, I personally like to use Temios. But anyway, all the applications, whether PuTTY or Temios, is going to do the job. If you made it this far, your VPS is already safer than 90% of the servers that are out there. But don't stop there. Security isn't just a one-time setup, it's a habit. So stay sharp, stay protected, and check back often for more node setup and VPS tips like this. If you found this valuable, please hit the like so YouTube knows to show this to others as well. And if you've got any questions, drop them in the comment section, or you can also directly contact me through my social channels down there or join my Discord community. I respond every comment that I get. This is the Pen Inspiration Hub. Thanks for watching this video and see you in the next one. Bye.